if you're happy to let kids starve, because kids can't eat flags, they can't eat claps either.
This is it. Nurses aren't paid in flags. Doctors, teachers, they're not paid in flags. What good is your so-called patriotism?
Right. And we're recording. Welcome to the 6th episode of the Unpick podcast with me, Kay, and my co-host, S. In 1963, Audley Evans, Paul Stevenson, and Owen Henry instigated the famous Bristol bus boycott. So Bristol has a history of being a seat of protest. Earlier this summer, we saw the statue of Colston pulled down and chucked into the river. I saw someone on Twitter ask, "What's in the water in Bristol?" And someone said Edward Colston. I thought that was funny.
Wait, who said? No, they need a shout out. That's amazing. No, but he's not still in the river. They took him out, didn't they? They fished him out.
Yeah, they fished him out. And earlier this week, we saw Bristol yet again at the centre of protest and civil unrest over the controversial new Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill 2021. But before we talk about why this bill is controversial and why it's solicited the reaction that it got in Bristol and other parts of the country, let's kind of take a step back and see how this got to the front pages. Because this bill has been making its passage through Parliament quite unceremoniously. No one was talking about it. And all of a sudden, it shot to the front pages. And it started because of what happened on Clapham Common just last week.
Yeah, so this is all tied up with the Sarah Everard case. So Sarah Everard was a young woman who was walking home in South London, and so far as we know, was then kidnapped and murdered by was he an acting
Serving.
police officer? So he was actively, okay, so he was serving, not active. He was a serving police officer, and of course that it was a massive, I think it was a shock to the nation. There were vigils. I know around where I live, there were lots of on the nearby railing, nearby park, loads of cards, flowers, stickers, you name it. So really shocking case. And the local community, what's the name of the charity? I forget the name, but I think people in the area wanted to kind of come together, have a moment of sort of collective mourning, collective thought on Clapham Common. And so I think the group, maybe when I'm talking, you can find the name of the exact charity. I think it's Girls Unite or Women's Unite or something like that. But so what they said is they reached out to the police to liaise with the police because they wanted to hold this vigil. And essentially what happened was it wasn't a yes, but it was a lack of a no. So the London mayor, the mayor, they didn't quite say yes because once again we're still in the lockdown. Come that weekend, I think it was about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
You have this vigil, lots of people come, and it turned into scenes of chaos.
Yeah.
There was a classic picture of that red-headed actress who I once again cannot remember her name, with the police, essentially standing, not like sort of on her, trying to
kneeling on her, almost.
right,
Yeah.
right, almost kneeling on her, and this vigil that was meant to be a solemn moment turned into absolute chaos. And also, previous to the chaotic moment, Kate Middleton had done her walkthrough with no mask, which was quite interesting. So it was a big thing. There was a lot of public support, and that's probably maybe why the Met Police didn't say no or do anything like that. So they didn't encourage it, but they also didn't take active steps to kind of lock off Clapham Common, have police kind of cordoned off and, patrolling the area. So this all happened. There was all of this chaos. Think about the symbolism, right? There are these groups of women and men, I'm sure, but mostly women at this vigil, in this moment, contemplating the fact that this is a police officer who is meant to serve and protect you, has then done this horrible thing to one of your own, and his brothers in arms, aka other police men and also police women, are now almost not doing the same thing to you, but brutalizing you in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
When I saw that, I just thought, who's the Met Police's PR team? Because this does not look good.
The charity you were thinking of was Sisters Uncut.
This is it. Why did I think of Sisters Unite or Girls Unite? Yes, so Sisters Uncut, yes.
What maybe brought the scenes we saw in Clapham into focus for me, and for lots of people I saw on Twitter, was the weekend before Rangers had won the Scottish Premier League.
Yes.
In Glasgow. The police had a clever piece of policing.
Hands off. It was very hands off policing, yes.
The police took a hands-off approach.
Mhm.
As Rangers fans celebrated throughout the city, they congregated in very large numbers, despite being told not to, and despite being in clear contravention of the COVID-19 regulations.
Yeah,
Last weekend, the weekend previously, we'd seen images of the police creating a cordon around the football fans, but not quite intervening in the same way.
yeah.
And then the weekend afterwards,
And also, one thing to notice:
Mhm.
these were men, or largely men, celebrating a sporting event,
yeah,
right? Which, of
yeah.
course, does it pales in comparison to a young woman killed by a police officer. So these are vastly two different events, and I would hazard to say that the vigil was far more important than the Rangers supporting, their win.
I mean, I've seen reports that suggest that the first part of the vigil was quite peaceful.
Hmm.
It certainly must have been for them to allow Kate Middleton to. I don't want to impinge on her character or her motive, so I'll park that to the side. I've read reports that say the first part of it was peaceful. The police have said that it was a largely
Yeah.
female police officers at the initial bit, and it's when the riot police turned up that things went sour. Now, I know from experience from 10 years ago at the Occupy Wall Street, Occupy St. Paul's. I was there and I remember that it was quite a peaceful, kumbaya, relaxing. There was
Hmm.
a tent with books, there was a tent of first aid, there was a tent with food. And it's only when the riot police turned up, or the TSG, the Territorial Support Group, which is kind of an innocuous name for large,
Thugs.
bulky men in
Sorry, let me not
helmets.
say thugs. Hmm.
And there is something about when they turn up that changes the dynamic. Any
It
any
does.
protest I've ever been to, there's something about when the riot police turn up.
It does. I mean, we saw the same scenes in when America was on fire last summer.
Yeah,
You have these crowds of kids, families. I think Portland, Oregon was one of the starkest examples of this, where it was just mothers. It was called, I think, the mothers' protest, and the police turn up. Even soldiers in Iraq and these places don't necessarily dress to that degree,
yeah,
and it absolutely does change the air because suddenly, if you're part of the protest, you're now on the defense in a way that you were not before when it was all like you were saying, kumbaya, and it does bring into question the tactics. And this is exactly what happened. Like you were saying, that this police bill was traveling as all bills do, like you were saying, fairly quietly. There was
yeah,
not much opposition to it.
yeah,
But what the Sarah Everett vigil showed us was that these are the tactics that you should expect when inevitably there's going to be a Brexit protest, when you're going to have future anti-vaxxers. Whatever protest, whatever side of the political aisle you align with, people you don't support, people you support, expect these same tactics with the police, have far greater powers to shut protests down.
yeah,
And I think that's the main issue with this particular bill is that the police already have incredible power, and we've seen them use it time and time again. But now they've got even more powers. I was reading something where something as simple as the level of noise a protest garners is somehow sufficient enough to shut down a protest, because somehow if you can't get into your work building, or if you're working and it's a bit noisy,
yeah,
you can't get on with your daily business. So that's a valid reason. Completely forgetting the fact that protests are there to make people uncomfortable. We all agree on that. It's about the level of discomfort that we should be able to tolerate. And I think
yeah,
for me, I do believe that this bill does go too far in that, because if the police can shut your peaceful, supposed legal protest down for any reason, then
yeah.
what does a legal protest even look like?
Let's talk about the bill. What's in the bill? Let me read out what the government fact sheet says, and then maybe unpick it for us what the impact and effect of this will be. So, according to the government, the measure in the bill will allow the police to take a more proactive approach in managing highly disruptive protests, causing serious disruption to the public. The provisions in the bill will widen the range of conditions that the police can impose on static protests to match existing police powers to impose conditions on marches. So, the bill will make no distinction between a static protest, this is when you stand outside a building, for example, holding a placard, and when you march. And then later on, it says the bill will broaden the range of circumstances in which police may impose conditions on a protest. So it's
Mhm.
expanding and widening the powers of the police, meaning more and more types of protests will fall into scope of the bill. And just finally, you were talking about the noise. The bill talks about noise amplification devices.
Yeah.
that's a megaphone to you and I? Or is
Mm-hmm.
it someone shouting with a cupped hand? Or is it someone, the Brexit guy used to carry around a traffic cone? Is that an amplification device?
Also, just before you carry on, I want to say also, just reading the fact sheet, this including a single person protest.
Yeah,
So there is no critical mass. It can just
yeah,
be one plus, right? One person is enough. If they have a speaker, then that could be something that the police would shut down. Now, if you're familiar with Stratford
yeah,
Station in
yeah,
London, there is a very particular area. If you live around there or have been there, you know where people stand outside and they preach, right?
yeah,
And often, I think that's a protest. I would hazard to say that that's a protest against the modern world.
yeah,
I, yes, my auntie is there preaching with the Bible, calling on the name of God. I don't want her to be shut down. Is it annoying as I walk past? Yes. I think once again, it's just, I think we all have to get comfortable with what exactly a protest is, right? So John Lewis, not John Lewis the shop, but John Lewis, the elder statesman, elder African American statesman who
yeah.
passed away, I think, who was known for.
Was it Georgia?
Yes, yes. He was from Georgia, and he was one of the people who were beaten up by the police trying to desegregate the canteens, right? In
Yeah,
the Deep South. He said, you cause good trouble, as he called it. Protests, whether you agree with them or not, are about causing a level of discomfort. We must get used to that. I think this idea that a protest can't affect me. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to see it.
yeah,
Any disruption, however minimal, is unacceptable. And that's not what happens in a democratic society. I'm okay with the pro Brexit people, whoever wants to protest, once the lockdowns are lifted. I'm okay with slight delays to the trains. I'm okay with
yeah,
traffic, within reason. Can ambulances get through, etc., etc. But we have to get comfortable with the idea that protests cause discomfort. And I think this is what this bill for me seems to want to shield people from. And let's all take it all back. The government clearly says the idea of having a new public order bill was first seeded at the Extinction Rebellion marches, where I think they shut down, was it Heathrow or Gatwick? One of the airports they shut down. They shut down big roads. There
yeah,
was the massive protest in central London. And that's what they thought, we need a new bill, right? Now think that through,
yeah.
right? That's dangerous as far as, in my humble opinion.
Because the bill was a reaction to BLM and to Extinction Rebellion.
Yes,
Now, what is the point of a protest if it doesn't disrupt? That is the whole point of a protest. You're trying to
absolutely.
sanitize protest. And here's the thing, I don't know how long it's been, maybe I don't think 10 years, but maybe 5 years. We've now had the petitions website.
Hmm.
I'd be interested to know, and I can't think of the top of my head, have the petitions to Parliament changed a single law? So if petitioning Parliament by going online and signing a
Hmm.
petition
Yeah.
has not changed the law in this country in any way, the only recourse if we were to protest. Now, this is not even turning into like violent protest.
Yes.
These new powers curtail peaceful protests.
Yeah.
So if you scroll down the bill, one of the smaller but I think powerfully symbolic is that the new bill will ensure vehicular. Is it vehicular or vehicular?
Yes. It's vehicular, I
Vehicular.
think.
Whenever I think of the word vehicular, I think manslaughter because that's the
Manslaughter,
only.
right? Yeah, vehicular manslaughter. Just say he ran you over with a car.
Ensure vehicular entrances to the Parliament estate remain unobstructed. It gives the police powers to clear Parliament Square.
That's very Lafayette Square, Trump, Washington, D.C.
And I think it's symbolic that we as the people, if there's one place in the country
The
we
center
should be
of
able to
power.
turn up and protest, it's in front of Parliament. It's in the home of
Absolutely.
democracy.
Right.
If we can't protest in front of Parliament,
Mm-hmm.
then the symbolism of Parliament disappears.
Yes.
It's one thing to say, look, you don't be disrupted to businesses. But I think disrupted to MPs is the
Is a
minimum.
minimum. It's absolute minimum. And I think we all have to be, and it's something that, like you said earlier, should bring everyone from all sides of the aisle together, because tomorrow it's you. Because like you said, when this bill was crafted in with
Yeah,
Extinction Rebellion in mind and the BLM, those are people who had nothing to say, because it's like, yes, I don't care about those issues. Go on. But tomorrow you want to protest some perceived
yeah,
inequality, and you want to be on the streets and you want to exercise your right to the freedom of protest. Now you can't, right? Because I know that there are many issues where that will absolutely get me on the street. And I want to know that I'm free to do so as long as I am peaceful. And like I said earlier, we have to all get comfortable with the fact that protests are uncomfortable, but we all have to collectively agree on, I guess, what the level of discomfort is. And for me, what this bill says is there is no level. We're already protecting you from something that we perceive to be
Yeah.
detrimental to you as a member of the public, or as someone who owns a business, or someone who's going on with the daily life. And that's simply unacceptable.
And also another part of the bill, which did you read about? Was it Butlins or Pontins?
With the Irish names?
Yes. So they had drawn up a list of surnames, Irish surnames, which I think a lot of them were, which they determined were predominant in the traveller community. So I think McDowell's was one of them. They
Yes.
basically had first of all, you stupid for writing this one down. But they had a policy of basically denying, what is it, parking, like camper van
Access.
parking, however you access Butlins, to basically the traveller community. I think
Yes.
what's interesting is like they basically got a slap on the wrist.
That's racist.
And I think that tells you just first of all how deeply
Yeah.
discriminated towards the traveller community we are still in this country.
Absolutely.
This new
Yeah.
bill contains provisions,
Oh no. Yes, I read that. Yes, for them.
right? See, this bothers me a lot. But sidebar, I let the YouTube algorithm on autoplay. So I caught myself listening to Andrew Neil hosting a show on Spectator TV. And, this thing on YouTube now, you can look at the bottom of the bar and see the
Yeah.
different chapters and different topics. So I saw this was one of the
Godsend.
topics. I clicked on it and there was an Irish traveller journalist on it. And she was talking about how it wasn't talking about the bill, but talking about Pontins / Butlins story.
You don't even know. You don't even care which one it is. It's one of them. I'm unsure myself. I'll be
And
honest.
how it's discriminatory and etc. etc. I'm like, yeah, I agree with this. And then Andrew Neil, never passing up an opportunity to cause division or to do a racism. He's like, and
What?
it's amazing because can you imagine what the response would be if they had a list of Jamaican sounding names? And then she goes,
Sir,
yeah.
those. Oh my god.
And she goes, yeah, it'd be war. And I sit there going,
So okay. So who? I was on your side. I was on your side until you started this. I was on your side.
so this is a feature of right-wing politics, which is, I don't know if you've seen there's a really good Twitter account
Yeah.
called Accidentally Left Wing. This
Yes.
is when people on the right accidentally make salient arguments, but not in the direction they think they were.
Also, sarcasm on Twitter doesn't quite read well when you're. It's anyway. If only they knew that.
That is so true. People who say, well, if we pay people $15 for flipping burgers at McDonald's, what next? Will we have to pay nurses and teachers more?
Yes.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm still reeling from the fact that she said, if to Andrew Neil, if we had Jamaican sounding surnames. Once again, you absolute donor, right? One, what is a Jamaican sounding surname? Do you know the history of these people of those islands? You know what it is, because you don't care what black people look at. You just thought it's an African sounding name. It sounds black. It's gonna be Jamal. It's gonna be Jamal.
Okay, between you and I, let's think of some Jamaican sounding surnames. I think they mean like Buju, Shaba. What do they mean?
What is the Jamaican? See, the thing is, if Andrew Neil said African sounding surnames, I understand, because fine, it makes sense. There are names that actually sound African because they're African. They're unique to the continent, right? What on God's name? What in God's name is a Jamaican sounding surname? Do you know the history? Do you know where these names come from? Because you guys did a genocide, cleared out any people who would actually have unique sounding names. Anyway, this is not time for a history lesson.
No, and the point I was making with the kind of Twitter comparison is that this thing about pushing to the lowest denominator, instead of applauding the fact that, let's say it was the case that if they had somehow devised Jamaican sounding names, everybody would have kicked up about it. That is progress. That's a good thing. Like, what is this drive to kind of pull everyone down, like with the minimum wage? Instead of saying, yes, let's pay teachers, doctors, nurses, firefighters more, let's just pull everyone's salary down. And the same thing, this is what Andrea was saying. It's like, would he be happier that if there was discrimination against both Jamaican sounding names and
Yeah, he'd be
Irish,
happy.
right?
Absolutely. Yes. Andrew Dick would be delighted. Yes.
What was this pointless intervention? Again, this desire, like, oh, there's too much unity going on here. There's
Wait,
too
I'm
much.
also confused. His point was, like you're saying, what was the point of that intervention? What was his point? Also, was his point that the Irish travelers handled it in a more civilized? Like, what was his point?
So, I mean,
Like, black people would be on the street the next day, and that's a problem.
his point is valid. The first half was valid, that there is not enough attention
Yeah,
on the plight of the traveler community in this country.
absolutely.
And on the
Yes.
fact that Pontins/Butlins could do this,
Let me
and then
Google
sort
which one
of,
it is.
and they basically just got a telling off from the Equalities Commission, basically a pinky promise not to do this again.
Is it pinky promise?
That's a
It is.
problem.
It is. Yes,
They should shut down the place.
they should.
So that first part is valid. But then you just can't pass up the opportunity to do a racism. Right? You just can't. You just can't let it go. That meme when the urge is too strong.
I think I know the one you're talking about. Anyway, we've detoured enough. Your point.
So-
Okay, so where were we?
The police crime sentencing in courts bill also has provisions to kind of clear out,
Right.
if I remember correctly, it puts additional burdens on traveler sites and doesn't make a distinction between commercial and private land. Basically, it makes it easier for the police to move along traveler communities, which is a problem. Which is a problem. They are heavily marginalized. They are heavily discriminated against. They often have the worst, like, educational health outcomes,
Massively underrepresented in every facet of public life.
and not just kind of in the UK, but historically, one of the first
Yes.
communities persecuted in World War II were the Roma Gypsy communities.
Yes.
I wonder why that. There's a surface level reason for it, which is, crime, violence, disruption. But I think that's more a consequence of being forced to live like. I think this must be a deep. I don't know. Maybe I'm riffing here, but what is it about society that finds normal people who refuse to have a fixed place quite unsettling? I don't know.
That it just was that a pun. That was an unintentional pun. Finds it unsettling.
No pun intended.
I mean, that aside, because I think it'd be interesting because clearly we both don't know much about that particular way of life. Because is it also most? Wait, sidebar. Do you remember that Channel 4 show?
My Big Fat Gypsy Wedding.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'd be interested to read an article on what that program did for Gypsy Irish representation. Also, I'm not sure if Gypsy is the correct term. So if it isn't,
Yeah, that's a good point.
it's a traveller community that maybe is the word, because also these are different. Because, for example, the Roma are a different group to the Irish travellers.
Yeah,
So essentially it's a group of different communities that the way of life is nomadic in this modern world of settlement. And I think it's also about a lot of things in the modern world are linked to fixed abode, right? To get a bank account, to open, an account with the government, to get any
Yeah.
benefits or any entitlements that you
Yeah.
are owed, to get a doctor, to register with the doctor, you need a fixed place. A lot of places don't accept PO boxes. So I don't think that what that leads to is reduced access to healthcare,
Yeah.
education.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, there's this thing about, well, people don't know who these people are. They're not necessarily motivated to learn about this community and help this community integrate. And
Yeah.
obviously that breeds insular communities. And we all know with insular communities, there are vulnerable people within them that will never
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
access to help. And it's a whole thing.
I'm sure there's some good think pieces about My Big Fat Gypsy Wedding.
I enjoyed those. I don't know if in 2021
you watched a couple episodes?
Everyone did.
I didn't.
And you didn't?
Maybe I saw a trailer or two.
Well, so is that another pun?
No,
It's an unintentional pun.
no. Damn,
Wait,
my
am I the only?
my
Wait, am I the-
subconscious on fire.
Wait, you didn't? Am I the only one who
No,
watched it? No, was I a whole fan? No, but I watched enough to because I think I was also curious because I didn't know much about this community, so I did watch it.
what I watched, and I think I'm thinking about it now because it gave me similar vibes. Benefit
Okay,
Street,
I didn't watch Benefit Street. I think with that name, I knew it would annoy me to watch that.
because there's like a veneer of trying to give you an insight into how another side lives, how
But it's all
people,
like shame.
but it's also kind of this not voyeuristic, almost anthropological is giving it too much of a kind of
It's just say
sanitized.
voyeuristic.
Do you know what I mean?
Huh.
There's this kind of like perverse voyeurism that kind
Mm-hmm.
of it's called like poverty tourism or
Yeah.
poverty porn. I
Mm-hmm.
kind of got those vibes of yes, we're kind of interested, but we're also not interested. It's a bit like when right wing Republicans always talk about what goes on in gay clubs. There's like that kind of weird curiosity, but it's also judgment at the same time.
I mean, sidebar.
Yeah,
Going,
sidebar.
I'm just running with that.
Yeah,
Wasn't wait Lawrence v. Texas was like the biggest case that I think brought down like because I think Texas it was illegal to have gay sex,
right.
and am I embellishing? Yes. So just run with me. So I think Lawrence. I'm just going to say this. I sort of know roughly the details, but essentially what they did is the police sort of thought that these two people would be together and like
Yeah,
bust them through the door mid-act and then like took them to prison. And then
yeah,
obviously the whole case then rose up to the Supreme Court when it was about privacy. And I think there
yeah,
was like your right to privacy trumps these city state laws. But it's kind of going back to your point about people who tend to have a very fixed. What's that word I'm thinking of? Where you're so it's almost a fixation of something that it's not a titillation, it's a fixation of things. And you know how sometimes the most
yeah,
actively
yeah.
homophobic people tend to, and I think we've detoured far too long.
Whilst we're on the subject, whilst we're
Hmm.
taking a detour, might as well stop at the local town. You know, so stop for burger and chips, the local one. Um, that's the Police Crime Sentencing in Courts Bill 2021. So I think maybe in summary, this follows a pattern of a government that's quite intent on restricting civil liberties
Hmm.
where it suits them. So this is the same government that has picked a fight with Parliament, trying to prorogue Parliament. The same
Yeah.
government that I'm going to say sanctioned press attacks on the judiciary
Yes. Yes.
because the Secretary of State for Justice really should have stepped in and defended the impartiality of the judiciary. But
Yeah. I think it was the first time in the UK I'd heard the term activist judges because I thought that was a term specific to America, but it was the first time I'd heard that because in the UK our judiciary don't even know who, for the most part,
yeah,
no one knows on the street who the chief supreme whatever it is. Um,
yeah,
I think that was a scary time for sure, and I
yeah,
think it is a scary time because
yeah,
we have to be vigilant about our civil liberties because
mm,
I can sense in the air that Brexit is going to cause a lot of economic pain for a lot of people. And I think there are going to be certain people who are going to want to be on the streets. Priti Patel, what she did today in terms of the asylum bill, that is something
hmm,
that would get someone like me on the street to
yeah,
protest
mm,
about human rights, rights for asylum seekers, rights for people who come to the UK seeking a better life, and the Geneva Convention, all of that tied up. That is an issue that I care about and would get me on the street. I don't want to be criminalized because I attended a peaceful protest or because
yeah.
the police turned up and turned it into a violent protest,
It's
And it's
yeah.
something that we should be on all of our radar, regardless of where you stand or not.
It's almost as if these people hate everything about Britain. I know I've said this before in a podcast, but the more and more you think about it, the things that people associate with the UK, or used to 10 years ago, freedom of speech, are slightly robust, not entirely free, but in a broad sense, a free and robust media, an independent judiciary, a strong parliament, a well respected BBC, all, an NHS, which is the jewel,
An
envy of the
education
world.
system as well. Education
They're kind of
system.
hell bent on attacking all these things.
Hmm.
Instead, they love the branding without the content. They love the box without the stuff inside it. And this is kind of the apotheosis of this has kind of
It's a flag shagging. Is that what you're leading to?
has crystallized in a weird fetish. And I'm going to let you kind of explain this one to us because I think this one's been rubbing you the wrong way.
Listen, so this will start. Well, it didn't start. I think it culminated.
Mhm.
I think it burst into the public scene.
Yeah,
So I really, really, really dislike when, especially in the UK, because we don't have a tradition of flag worship like they have in America, right?
yeah, yeah,
I noticed it when, what's his name? Keir Starmer. I forgot his name. When he did his sort of revamping the Labour Party, where we launched the Labour Party, had this
yeah,
giant Union Jack next to him.
yeah,
And I have nothing against the Union Jack. I have
yeah,
nothing against someone who wants to fly in their house or whatever. My main issue is national symbols belong to everyone,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And a problem arises when other people feel they can dictate to other people what they can and can't do. It is my personal dislike. I admit that. I would never think to tell someone how they can and
yeah.
can't fly, whether they can fly a flag in their house, on their property. And so, anyway, to bring it home, Robert Jenrick, he's the Housing and Communities Minister, had this interview on BBC Breakfast with Naga and her friend. I forget his name.
Charlie State.
Charlie State, yes, but it's more about Naga. So
Yeah,
he ends the interview and he says, and Robert Jenrick, by the way, has this massive flag in the back. Was he at home?
I think it was in his office.
Which is even worse,
Yeah,
because don't you need space to work? And he had this giant flag, and he also had a photo of the Queen.
yeah,
I think that was the creepy thing. And
yeah,
so Charlie State makes this joke about, oh, do you something to the tune of, oh, don't you think your flag is big enough? Which is making a
yeah,
joke because this flag is massive,
yeah,
and Naga is on the. She's not technically on the floor, but she's killing herself. You can hear her laughing, and she can hear her
yeah,
laughing.
yeah,
And just turned into this thing about they hate Britain, they hate our
yeah,
national symbols, they hate our national emblem. They're making fun of the flag. No, they're making
yeah,
fun of Robert Jenrick. They're not
yeah,
making fun of the flag because the flag is an inanimate object. You
yeah,
can't make fun of it,
yeah,
right? But I hate this very extreme nationalism that's couched in the talk of patriotism. If you
yeah,
truly care about people in this country, you will care that they're well fed, they're well
yeah,
educated.
yeah,
There's an NHS that can look after them when they fall ill. That people can afford to buy homes. People can afford to live in safe, clean environments. But you don't care about these. You don't care about
mm,
people. You just care about putting on a show. The same
yeah,
people who you supposedly care about free speech, you don't care about free speech. You just care that you can get on Twitter and type really fast about how you care about free speech. But when it comes to the hard work of actually defending free speech and on all these so-called British values,
yeah,
when it's time to beat down minorities with British values and are you British? Suddenly it's a cudgel and you want to beat these communities to death with these things, but you don't embody these values that you so
mm,
supposedly love. And
yeah,
it's really dangerous when national symbols are taken. It's like it's almost a religious experience, right? It's almost like everyone has to fly a flag. But this is the same the Union Jack that everyone has on mugs, rugs, clothes, carpets. It's everywhere. It's a brand beyond the country.
yeah,
But somehow we're
yeah.
meant to sort of like respect it. And I just hate that sentiment completely. And I think I hate that.
Now, I'm going to bring you into something, but before that, let's just circle back a little bit on Keir
Mm-hmm.
Starmer. What's going on with him? Because the the bill we talked about, Labour, I think, was initially going to abstain because Labour, because Keith wants to look hard man Keith
Every
wants to
time you spell his name wrong, I just
because he wants to signal that the Labour Party is strong on crime, law, justice, national
mhm,
security, foreign policy.
mhm.
I mean, first of all, the Labour Party led us in a legal war. I don't know what that did for your reputation. So I would park this kind of um, macho attitude towards kind of. I would just park it. Only once the vigil at Clapham Common turned to what it did, the Labour Party decided they would vote against the bill.
Mhm.
Earlier today, we learned that the Robert Jenrick, who we were talking about, is going to intervene in Liverpool City Council.
Yeah.
Last I read, before we came on the podcast, Labour Party was going to endorse this. The flag in the background isn't just, oh, Keir wants us to show he's a bit more patriotic. I think it signals this shift.
It
And
does.
I saw a really good meme which had Boris next to Keir, and there's a kind of stick on Boris that said buy one, and then on Keir it said get one free. I said in our kind of very, very first episode, Labour being in power makes a difference to the Conservatives being in power.
Absolutely,
But
yeah.
I struggle to see what Keir is doing because you're giving the Conservatives a free pass on everything. We've had more effective opposition at points from Marcus Rashford, from Jess Phillips, from even Piers Morgan. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
what is the Labour Party? But going back to the flag shaggers, there was, honestly, this blew me. So you said you've not heard about this.
No, what's this?
Okay. So I will try to, okay, let me read an article on this and then you can tell me what you think
Okay.
about this, right?
Okay.
So picture the scene. The BBC's Director General, Tim Davie, is before the relevant select committee. Right, so he's being questioned about the BBC's budget, the BBC's priorities,
Okay.
etc., etc. Tory MP Tim Davie is now asking questions.
Are they related?
Tim Davie is the Director General. James Wilde is the MP. Sorry, my
Oh,
bad.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because
So
it's the
James
same.
Wilde, the MP for Northwest Norfolk, turns to the guy and says, in your own report last year, so this is the BBC's annual report
Yes.
of 268 pages. So I just want to circle back.
What
This
is it
is
better, the length of the report?
this is grown man MP
Yeah.
on national television being recorded for posterity. This will never be deleted. This is there forever. His job is to hold the Director General of the BBC to account. Someone from Norfolk ever gets listened to us. This is what your MP, who you've sent to Parliament to represent your interest, is asking.
Your annual report last year, 268 pages. Do you know how many Union flags featured in any of the graphics in those glossy pages?
I have no idea.
Well, it was zero. Do you find that surprising?
No, I think that's a strange metric. I have to say, one of the things I looked at when I came into the building this morning was a Union Jack flying proudly on Broadcasting House, which it does on many, many, many days of the year.
In your own report last year of 268 pages, do you know how many Union flags were pictured in any of the graphics?
What?
Davie replied, in all the briefings I got for this meeting, that was not one of them, with a slight smirk, I have to say. Wilde triumphantly goes, 0.
Wait. Wait, what? Wait, so he wanted the Union Jack. So, okay, if the BBC had a graph on how many households had the license, he wanted a flag just affixed at the
He wanted a
corner.
flag somewhere. He wanted it to be
Why?
printed on a flag.
But it says it in the name. It's the British Broadcasting Corporation. There's no ambiguity as to where it originates from.
Now, Davie's a former Conservative, the
No, of
BBC
course.
Director General, like former Conservative Party councillor, not just.
Yeah.
And then the guy goes, do you find that surprising?
No.
Tim Davie goes, that's a strange metric. And he goes, when I came to work this morning, there's a giant Union Jack flying above the building. And then this smug little,
It's not enough.
I think in a report of 268 pages, you would have found space for one Union Jack.
What?
And then he says this weird, bizarre thing. My constituents will expect to see at least one Union Jack.
No, they wouldn't because they don't read. Sorry, I apologize. That's not fair. I'm
No,
sure
but
people
who's read? Who reads the annual BBC
This is
report?
my point. That's what I meant. Who reads the? Not that people in Norfolk do not read. Let me clean that up. Who reads the BBC report unless you're part of the defund the BBC movement or whatever?
But let's ask this question: how does he know there are no Union Jacks?
Did he flip through all of them and? It's this fake. The thing is, if you have this same MP from Norfolk and say to him, "Did you vote for feeding the kids over the summer?" I would
Yeah.
like to see his political record. And actually, maybe we can actually pull out his political record. Maybe for the next episode, put a pin on that and go
Yeah.
back and check, right? Because hungry children don't care how many Union Jacks are on these there's reports that they will never read or care about because they're children. They care about making sure that they eat, play, and have a childhood. And I'm sick and tired of this fake nationalism. You're not of this fake patriotism, because it's all fake. If you genuinely do not care and do not dedicate your life to being actively good in people's lives, or at least just a neutral person, you have nothing to say. These are the same people who clap like seals at the every Thursday for the NHS workers, and the same people voted for that 1% increase in salary.
I mean, honestly, this has to be the most stupid set of questions any human has ever asked. Because then he went on about it.
No, he didn't.
There was a second presentation or slide pack the BBC produced, and he was like, do you know how many flags were in that?
No one cares.
I'm sorry the BBC isn't producing enough material for
This is insane. This is absolutely insane. It's a flag. It's an inanimate object. It's a flag. The flag has meaning. I accept that. The flag means a lot to people. I accept that. I get that. I understand that. But this is verging on, this is insane. I can't be the one who thinks this is insane. Who cares?
Can someone just post him a flag? Now, popular segment. I'm going to speak into existence. Our always in demand popular segment. Something in my spirit.
I think, you know what? I think you have a lot on your spirit, except you don't bring it here. You just text it to me.
Let me testify. Let me come to the front of the church.
Okay, well, I hands are raised.
And lay it all out before.
Lay your burdens.
Lay my burden. Okay, so I've got a problem with Laura Kuenssberg.
Also, tell people who she is.
So she is the BBC's political editor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a hard job. It's a very difficult job. You're trying to. It's a difficult job. That much
especially in this environment, because you have to appear impartial, right?
Yeah, and okay, it's a difficult job, and I've always tried to give it the benefit of the doubt. But then, so let's scroll back almost a year ago. I forget her name. I want to say Philippa Creer. Might get the name wrong, but Daily Mirror journalist breaks the Dominic Cummings story.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I remember people said this at the time, they'd never seen this happen before. The journalist from the Daily Mirror breaks the story about Dominic Cummings, and Lauren Kuenssberg responds to mitigate the story. To say she understands that this is not what happened, blah, blah, blah. She's hearing from sources that this is not what happened. And everyone's like, why are you subtweeting another journalist on their scoop? It was very sus. It was very dodgy. Running interference for the government, very suspicious. But then, I'm like, it's a difficult job, and I understand you need to kind of, stay in the good graces of MPs of all parties to kind of maintain, to get inside scoop. But then this afternoon was too much. This morning, rather, was too much. It's like, this has gone too far. And did you see that last night the Prime Minister said the vaccine rollout has gone well because of greed and capitalism?
Yes. And apparently he said it in jest, is what he said.
That was tweeted by a journalist, so we know this has been said. Who's in the comments trying to add context, color, texture, and timber? It was weird. Honestly, why is the government paying Allegra Stratton 100K?
Pay her.
When you could just give Laura Kuenssberg 50. She was like, I understand from sources that it was a joke. This wasn't. But why are you jumping straight away to defend the Prime Minister? It just really bothers me that when there have been attacks on other politicians like Nicola Sturgeon, you're not there jumping to defend her. You're not jumping to defend other politicians.
Yeah, I saw that tweet. I think But what do you think's really going on? Do you think she's trying to keep her job because there's a shake-up looming for the BBC, or no?
And like, there's a kind of fake self-awareness because this is her. before you scream, I know, as one government source said, you could make it up, but even if it was a gag, things are so tense, blah, blah, blah.
I think also it was interesting that this is the battle she chose to pick because it's clear that it was going to be spun as a joke, said in jest, and people would move on the next day. It's the wisdom of choosing to this is the fight that you chose to step in. That's really weird to me. This week saw the first year anniversary of COVID lockdowns.
Yeah.
So we are at 120 something thousand deaths.
Yeah. Yeah.
Let that stay with you when you vote in May. And I hope if you haven't registered to vote for the local elections, there's definitely time to do so. I think the deadline is like the 29th of April or something, somewhere like that. Just double check that you're on the electoral roll. It literally doesn't take more than 2 minutes. Just literally Google how to register to vote, put your details in. Let that sit with you. That 100,000 plus people are dead a year later, when we were told 30,000 deaths would be a good outcome. And let the spirit of that sit with you as you go and vote. Is all I would say.
I just hate that I think it's called client journalism. This cozy relationship between the people who are supposed to be holding the powerful to account, because it's an industry where that relies on quotes, that relies on exclusives, that relies on
Harry
the
told
inside,
us, right? That
that relies on the insider track.
Yeah.
If we don't have a robust leader of the opposition, we don't have a robust and fair media. We don't have a judiciary that is supported, and then we've got a parliament that can be shut down or that can be muzzled. What is the substantive difference between us and countries that we look down on?
Yeah.
We have a government that is unchecked in every single way because the constitutional checks and balances just don't work. None of the things that are put in place to hold a government into account are working. So it's not, I have nothing against Laura Kuenssberg personally, but it just bothers me that this MP thought to ask about the number of flags in the report,
Right, and I think,
instead of asking the BBC about their commitment to impartiality.
Right, and I think the thing about this is when people talk about the free press, I don't think people understand what that means. Our press cannot be free if we have press conglomerates owned by Rupert Murdoch, where all the main papers in this country are run by the same person, essentially, right?
Yeah.
We cannot have free press. Also means that press it's antagonistic to people in power. The press in my mind, are people looking for holes in what the government is doing and pressing on certain issues. The press has to be antagonistic. I know you will know this. There's this Doctor Who episode, the Angels one. Spoilers, but at the end of the episode, essentially the angels are these intergalactic beings who were first formed when the universe first came into being, and they don't eat, or how they consume is, if they touch you, they'll send you back in time, and the lost energy. It's Doctor Who, so it doesn't make sense. But the point is, they send you back in time, and there's an energy loss, and they eat that, and that's what they eat. And they're sort of invisible. But if someone looks at them, then they take on the physical form of a statue, right? And so at the end of the episode, there are these three angels, and they're chasing the Doctor Who people. It's a really great episode. But at the end, what you find is the way they trap the angels is they get them to all look at each other. And so they're fixed in time forever, because number one is looking at number two, number three is they're all looking at each other. And that's how I imagine how democracy works: is you have the government, you have the judiciary, you have the press.
Yeah.
And everyone is checking each other, and no one has any room to mess up, because you're going to be checked by the judiciary. So when News of the World was hacking into people's voicemails and disregarding people's right to privacy, that was when the government and the judiciary should have stepped in and protected the people.
Yeah.
Right? When the government is abusing their power, that's when the independent judiciary and the antagonistic press steps in and reports to the government. And that's how people are best served in a democracy, and that's what a democracy looks like. And when you have a collapse of these checks and balances, that's what you get is the environment that we're in, where 120,000 people dead, and the protests that we're seeing is anti-lockdown protests, anti-vaxxers protests, as opposed to people flooding every single street in this country, socially distant and masked, every Thursday, everyone coming up with their pots and pans screaming and shouting that this government killed people, mishandling and misconduct. Billions were spent on track and trace or test and trace. And more money has already been allocated to that in the recent March budget. And there's nothing to show for it.
And that's how Doctor Who gives lessons on democracy. But that's true. I really like that image of they're all holding each other into account and no one's more powerful than the other. And that was the whole idea between three equal branches of government. Is anything on your spirit?
And we've talked about Sarah Everard a lot in this episode. This doesn't necessarily have much to do with her necessarily, or that court case. On Twitter, it was trending, not all men, because inevitably sensitive male souls across the world, across the country, felt that it was bridged too far when women, I think someone had tweeted, as a man, what can I do to make women feel more comfortable in public spaces? And you had this massive outpouring of women across the country telling their stories of being harassed, sexually assaulted at worst, just a whole gamut, And I saw, and you always see this, right? You always see this, not all men, but there's always going to be someone who says, well, how do I approach a woman if I'm interested? How do I avoid, once again, turn the whole conversation away from the fact that women just want to feel safe before we even discuss. This is not a top 10 issue when we're talking about the MeToo movement or protecting women or violence against women. In the pro-women movement, the last thing women are concerned about is how will a man approach me? Does he feel comfortable enough to approach me? Etc. Etc. Right? Because I've seen a lot of people say, especially in the light of the MeToo movement, was what loads of people meet their partners at work. What's the MeToo movement going to do for for the future of mankind if men and women can't get together, right? And to all the men who are asking, well, how do I approach a woman at the gym, in Tesco, at work? This approach a woman the same way you want a man to approach you. That's it. And if your automatic answer is, well, I don't want a man to approach me, there is your answer. Because a lot of men, and homophobia aside, because a lot of you people are homophobic out there, and the moment a man approaches you, it's fighting talk. Because how dare you assume I'm gay? But you assume all the time that these women or female presenting people are straight, but also would be then attracted to you. Because just because a woman is straight doesn't mean she's going to be attracted to you, right? There's a whole leap that you're making, right? Because imagine you're at the gym, you're working out, and this big guy comes. And the reason I say big is because I want to talk about the difference in physicality that men and women have on average, right? And how women feel physically the difference, essentially scared for their physical safety, and tend to kind of go along with go along with these things depending on the context, right? And so if you're at the gym, you're pumping iron, whatever, and this big guy approaches you and says, hey, you're looking good, my guy, etc., etc. Hey, show me how you bench 60. I don't even know how gym heads talk, so I'm just filling in the blanks. And you say, first of all, you'd be like, okay, I don't know what's going on. And then he starts he touches your elbow a little bit, hey, show me, and you take a step back. And you say, nah, I'm not on that, man. Leave me alone. And he's like, what? What do you mean? And you say to him, no, I'm not gay. And he says, see, what, your girlfriend doesn't let you have friends? Yo, I just picked up the new FIFA game. Why don't you come over? You would be fuming. A lot of you people would be fuming. You would have probably beat this guy or attempted to beat him up, right?
Yeah. Because do you remember there was a documentary about Purple Aki?
Yo.
And
no, tell the people who Purple Aki is, because a lot of people I don't think know who Purple Aki is.
So Purple Aki is a urban legend, but it exists. Is a tall, hefty Liverpudlian who apparently walks around approaching young men and asking to touch their biceps or touch their muscles or whatever it was. And it culminated in one young man who was so terrified of him, he, in his panic, running away from him, got run over, I think either by a car or by train.
I think it was a train. I think he died.
And it's like hearing this story and going, okay, but how should Purple Aki, what is the right way for Purple Aki to approach men in the future?
Right, and the answer is no. Don't leave men alone. Leave people with biceps alone, right?
Right. And it was easy for, if you look at the comment section, for people to understand that regardless of Purple Aki's intentions,
right,
because apparently like he'd also want to give advice and stuff.
Oh my God.
The men in the comment section, that is terrifying. Listen, if I'm walking and apparently Purple Aki is like 6 foot something tall.
Yeah.
And I see this shadow step from behind like a lamppost. How much can you bench? I'm like, not how much can I bench, how fast can I run?
Yes, we're talking about this in a humorous way, but the point still stands, right?
Yeah.
If you, from this whole conversation about women and safety and all the precautions women take to be safe, and the first thing you think of, oh, how am I going to pull the next time I'm in the club or whatever, your answer is, how do you want a man to approach you? And also, I was talking to, so in light of all this, I had different conversations with all my friends, male and female. And one thing one of my male friends said was, he said, because a lot of these conversations there's some women who say, if a man is attractive, then I tend to kind of give a little bit more leeway than if a man is not unattractive, etc. Right? And that is your right. And we're not here to discuss that. But what my male friend said was, a lot of these guys who want to know, like, how should I approach women? You already know. So while you're on the gram pretending like you have, your day is just covered with women and you want to chase after them, but you don't know how to, stop pretending. You know how women want to be approached. This whole thing about how do I approach women, this starts from a young age, from teenage, right? Part of learning social cues and social behavior is you try and you test your boundaries and your limits, and you stop acting like you're brand new. You know exactly how to approach women, right? And the often thing is, for women, this is not the first time this is happening. You're probably the fifth guy in a week who decided to approach the middle of the day on her way to the laundromat or whatever. And like, here you are with your group of friends, giggling like an idiot, talking about, yo, can I get your number? Oh, yo, my friend likes you. Sir, you're 26. Why are you not in it's Tuesday afternoon. Like, why are you not somewhere doing something productive? Right?
Random, like, it's not every place though, right?
This is it. If it's a club, fine. It's a social event. There's a sense of, okay, some people will be a little bit more accepting. But if you grab a woman in the club, it doesn't matter whether you're in the club, you grabbed her. Don't expect a positive result from that. Or just because one day, one time, one woman gave you a positive response doesn't mean that she has not spoken for all of womankind.
Something you mentioned that I heard a lot was, yeah, but then, what about romance in the workplace? Like,
you will never get any. You will never have. You've never had a workplace romance. You know exactly where you fall in the hierarchy. As Jordan Peterson loves to talk about hierarchies. You know exactly where you are in the hierarchy. Stop pretending as if workplace romance wasn't a valid option for you.
Sidebar: we need to do something on this whole like alpha male simps, beta males, soy boys, alpha females.
What the hell is an alpha female?
Hey, I don't. We need to talk about incels because.
No, you know what it is. We need to talk about incels, but I think we need to talk about what the incel community looks like specifically in the Black community, because I think those are two different things. Right?
Yeah,
in our community, it manifests as these hotepish guys. The guy you were talking about, Derek Jackson, right? Guru expert, but had some views which were very interesting about women and how it's actually, there's a lot of misogyny in our community that manifests itself in very unique ways because of obviously the cultural history, the heritage. And that's what the kind of that guy you were talking about. And maybe that's an episode in and of itself. But just going back to the Sarah Everard thing and how you approach women and how even you have these conversations. If you recognize there is a massive outpouring of just, for me, when I went on Twitter, when I talked to all my friends, it just felt like it was all coming out.
Yeah,
It was just this mass venting session across the country. about, women talking about putting keys between the knuckles, and I was like, oh, I remember when I was told to do that by one of my friends, who said, if you're walking home, make sure you got your keys ready, headphones out. It's something women educate each other on these things. This is not the time to think about, okay, what are my chances romantically? Read the room and understand where your place is in this conversation.
Have you got anything else?
No, just register and vote. That's it. Just vote. I know local elections are not as sexy because often you don't even know who your local councillor is, but you have enough time to look into.
Hey, when they switch your bins collections to once a month, that's when you start feeling it.
Don't wish that on that. Don't wish that on the good people. They don't do anything. They pay the taxes and live their lives. But I know but this is the thing. It's important. I mean, that's why we started this podcast, right? It's because you and I have all these conversations all the time.
Mm-hmm.
We can't keep talking about these issues and then at the same breath moan about apathy.
Yeah.
Because if all you and I just do is vote, and as opposed to actually talking about these things, we're just as bad as people who don't vote, right? And I think the government and these forces, it sounds very biblical, principalities and powers, but these political principalities and powers, I'm going to call them, are banking on our apathy, right? They're banking on the fact that we're not going to care that asylum seekers are going to be criminalized. The police are going to get massive powers. Matt Hancock still hasn't published all the details of the PPE contracts. They're banking on the fact that we just don't care. And they're getting away with things like this, right? And that's a problem.
We'll definitely talk about apathy and how we can get more people involved. So thank you for joining us on the Unpick podcast. That was our 6th episode. Follow us on Twitter at the Unpick_podcast. Follow us on Instagram, Gmail. Send us emails.
When's the last time you posted things?
On Instagram.
Yeah.
Look, this is demand-led economics, right? So
the supply shall increase as the demand increases.
Right. This is not that supply-side monetary theory. Let the demand build.
Fair enough. That's fair. But I mean, our emails are open, DMs, the DMs are open.
Yeah. Someone slide into our DMs.
Like Sweetie's DMs are now wide open, Our DMs are open for now. Twitter's a good place for us to interact. And the thing is, you don't know which one of us is tweeting. And so we can never be held to account.
that is true. Well, thanks for joining us. We will be back in 2 weeks' time.